Well, hello everybody. Welcome to VIP, Very Important People, Voices of and for Indigenous People. And Dr. Ramin and I are here today to welcome you and thank you for coming back. And we've got people watching already. We just got started. And so we're streaming live today on the Laurie Davis Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and we have a very special guest with us today. Good morning, Ramin. How are you doing down there in hot and fiery California?
Actually, what a difference a week makes. So it's pretty nice and cool. It was we're down to 70s Fahrenheit, so it's pretty pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wonderful to be back.
Have you got something around your neck? Are you wearing it?
I am my
Oh,
with honor.
oh,
And it has
just
very
hold it
much
up.
connected
Oh,
to our guest, I have to say.
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I got a couple of nice gifts from our guest last week too. So I'm
Yeah.
not wearing it today, but I have worn both pairs on shows already. What would we do without our friends? Oh my gosh, not much, would we? Well, let's not waste any more time. Let's just bring
Yeah.
her in. But before we do that, why don't we just talk, you and I, about why we want to do this show? Because this is an independent show. It's not connected to any of our channels.
Yeah.
This is something that we wanted to do. And my reason for doing it is to give a platform where we can bring in guests. Like right now, I'm looking for some guests for the next week's show. If you are connected to or you have activities planned for Orange Shirt Day on the 30th, we'd love to hear from you and get some people on here to talk about it and educate. That's your big deal. So why don't you talk about that? Over to you and whatever else. Why we want to do the show.
No, absolutely. You mentioned about education, and I think our goal is actually global awareness of and we call it the voice of Indigenous people, but it is for and because of the global attention we need. We need that awareness to see the challenges, but also the rich culture and traditions. So we usually look at just one side of things, but I think there's a lot of positive things that we can build on and as a foundation. So I really like to build on that and to show the pride and all the good things that has happened. And then, of course, that will help us to take care of the negative things, unfortunately. And our guest, obviously, today is a very special guest, and I know she will give us more awareness of what's going on. So that's our goal. Again, educating both sides in a way.
Right on. Okay, well, let's bring on Dr. Dianne Lafond. Oh, she just left. She just got cut out. All right. So we'll just wait until she's back. Oh, there she is. All right. Here she is, Dr. Dianne Lafond. Welcome to the show, Dianne.
Thank you, Dr. Laurie. How are you?
You're welcome. And we just lost you there. Did you have a little internet dip?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I had to click back in.
Yeah, I know.
Hi,
So,
Ramin, Dr.
Good
Ramin.
morning.
Yeah. So you heard our little blurb at the beginning why we want to do the show. We want to create a safe and beautiful platform for people to come in and be featured, whether they're an entrepreneur, whether they're a mom raising a family, whatever. This is their place to have a voice. So our special guest, Dr. Dianne Lafond, Health Ombudsperson in the province of Saskatchewan, the first and only office right now in Canada. And perhaps I'll stop talking because I don't know anything more than that, other than I know the terrific person that's sitting in that position right now. So over to you, Dianne. What is the Health Ombudsperson's office? What does that mean?
Okay, Dr. Laurie, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show today. And I'm coming to you today from Treaty 6 territory. So those are my Cree introductory. That's who I am. I'm a Cree First Nations woman from the Muskeg First Nation. I am the first First Nations Health Ombudsperson in the country of Canada. So our First Nations Health Ombudsperson's office was created by the 74 chiefs in Saskatchewan to look at healthcare or the lack of healthcare for First Nations people in the province of Saskatchewan. So our office, I was involved with the building of the office. So from May 16th of 2022, I was appointed interim from the chiefs in Saskatchewan, an interim health ombudsperson, and I was engaged to come and build this office so that we could have it operational by July 1st of 2023. So I had marching orders and I had outcomes, deadlines, and uh, I met everyone. We became operational July 1st of last year. Staff was all in place and it was time to get down to business, right?
Mm-hmm.
So since then, we have been learning some processes as we move along because you don't really have another organization to benchmark against, right? So,
Oh,
when
yeah.
you're the first office of its kind in Canada, you have to kind of find your way around of how you're going to, progress and how you're going to move forward. So, I think we did, well, I know we did a very good job. We have a very good data management system. It's called Path DMS. So we capture every contact that we have in the office, whether it's phone call, walk-ins. We have a website where people can go on there and file their complaints. However, one of the very important things of our office is we're very culturally grounded. So as First Nations people, we have a treaty right to health, and that's an international recognition. So our treaties, as you know, were signed with the British Crown, and we deal with the Canadian government as an administrator of our treaties. So we do have treaties 1 to 11, and under Treaty 6, we have the medicine chest clause. Medicine chest and pestilence clause, it's called. So we really are grounded in that Treaty 6 medicine chest because prior to contact, our First Nations people have their own healthcare system. We have our own traditional medicines, we have our own connectedness to the Creator and to our land and to our medicines. And our healers knew how to heal people, they knew which medicines to use, and they were gifted those gifts from the Creator of how to heal. And we still have those practices today, ongoing practices, which I've practiced myself. To give you an example, when my son went through his liver transplant at the age of 28, if it wasn't for the traditional medicines, the prayers, and the spirituality, he would not be here today. So our traditional medicines play a very important factor in who we are as First Nations people. And back in, during the colonial oppression, First Nations people were not allowed to practice their ceremonies, or the prayers and the spirituality. Back in the day when children were, taken and thrown in trucks and taken to residential school, the parents had to hide in the bush to practice their ceremonies. They were outlawed, you know. So there's a lot of history to what happened, but I really see a shift in time, though. I look around and I'm looking at so many powwow celebrations and ceremonies going on. One of the communities, First Nations communities that I worked at as a health director in Atakakoop, had their first annual powwow this year. I'm like, wow,
Wow.
so happy to see that. When you see a community that hasn't practiced that and now they are, there's a shift happening. Our young people, our culture is getting very strong and it's getting reignited and the flame is growing brighter and I see it and I'm like, I'm so thankful because the shame of being a First Nations person is going to dissipate over time. Because we're going to be, the young people are going to be proud of who they are. They're not going to be knocked down and said, we're going to kill the Indian and the child. You're not good people. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
all of those years of oppression that have happened is we're becoming stronger, more educated. You know, the education is our buffalo. That is our strength. You know, and I truly believe that our strength comes from our ancestors, the Creator. We're very connected to the Creator. Our ceremonies are very powerful. You know, and our cultural beliefs because the Creator put us here, and we're part of the land, we're part of the water, we're part of the air. We breathe all that in, and we're supposed to keep that serene, because if we don't, and there's pollution and there's all kinds of things happening, there's all kinds of natural catastrophes happening. The earth is upset, right?
Mhm.
There's pollution, there's environmental impacts happening. There's digging, there's drilling. When you upset Mother Earth, things happen. And that's what I truly believe as a First Nations person. And we need to provide education on how to allow the earth to heal itself. And a lot of these things that I talk about today are teachings that I've had to learn, because I was one of the intergenerational survivors of residential school. My mom and dad both went, so it was ingrained. The Roman Catholic Church was pounded in, you know, and they couldn't believe in anything else. And that's how I was raised. However, I had good friends that were very culturally grounded, and I thank her for really, uh, teaching me and understanding things. So, culture is a very big, huge part of our office. We understand the traumas, we understand the pain, we understand the racism, we understand the stereotyping of our people that occurs, in the healthcare system, in the justice system, right? It's within all the systems. But my focus here as the First Nations Health Ombudsperson is the healthcare system. And I lead a group of professionals, and we have an investigative department, and we have individuals that come to our office throughout the province. We even have clients in Alberta, you know, Ontario, Manitoba, because there's no other office of its kind. And if our people from Saskatchewan First Nations are living in these other provinces, we have a duty to assist them because they're a part of Saskatchewan First Nations.
Mhm.
So that's how, we develop and we do work. Um, so we have an investigative unit here that's led by a registered nurse and somebody who really is grounded in our culture. All my staff is of First Nations descent. They all understand what's happened to our people. And when I was selecting staff to work here, that was very important for me, is to get compassionate people that have a great understanding of the traumas that our people have experienced. Because if you don't understand that, you come at these investigations from different perspectives. It's hard to understand and get to the point of understanding where the people are coming from, right? So I think those teachings are very critical in understanding who we are as First Nations people. One of the things, and I said movement, I see movement happening. I see people becoming more vocal and using their voices, you know, and I encourage that. Your voice, use your voice. Back in the day, our ancestors and our parents used to always have this word for us that was called, they said, Giam, Giam Diane. And I'm like, no, no more Giam. It's time we speak up. It's time we use our voice. And Kiam in our language means let it go, let it be, you know. And a lot of our elderly people say that, and I'm telling them, no, you don't deserve that treatment. You know, you don't deserve to be mistreated or disrespected. You deserve respect. Every person on this earth deserves that, right? Including
Mhm.
First Nations people in this country. And unfortunately, we've been living in times where we've been disrespected in so many different ways, right? And when I was a little girl growing up, I was always thinking, because I was ashamed of being First Nations, I was always thinking, why? Why do people not like us? What is it about us? I used to think that. Even growing up as a teenager, I think, what is so different about me, right? And as years have gone on and I've learned more and I started becoming more and more present in who I was as a First Nations woman. And now as I sit here today, I'm I am so proud and I would stand up for our rights and till the end, I stand up for our people. I stand up to say, you know what? You can't treat her like that. You can't treat him like that. Why would you do that? Right? So asking people questions and holding people accountable is my job.
Ah,
But also creating relationships because we have to work together. We want to work with you to make the healthcare system as best as it can be for everyone, including Indigenous First Nations people. Understanding how our culture, needs to be a part of who we are. We breathe it, we see it. If we want Indigenous traditional medicines to work together like this with the Western medicine, then let us do that. That's our right. So I think there's a lot of education and teachings that need to happen. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done because there's still so many systemic issues with
yes.
healthcare that need to be addressed. However, in saying that, I was very moved, I'd say, the other day, 2 days ago, when my staff and I sat in our boardroom and we watched the live apology from the Canadian Medical Association to Indigenous people in Canada.
Wow.
It was overwhelming. I was so emotional. I'm like, they recognize it, you know. Their apology was very, I felt it was sincere. You know, some apologies, they can just kind of, I don't feel it. And I'm a very feeling person. I can tell when someone's sincere and when they're not. So I can read people pretty well. And I felt their apology was very sincere. And not only that, a couple of the doctors, like the Canadian Medical Health Association, uh, had the First Nations chair of the Canadian Medical Health Association in history. And it was Dr. Alika Lafontaine. He's no longer chair now, but he was chair. And it was nice to see him on that stage speaking. It was nice to see the other First Nations lady doctor speaking and the chair to talk about the harms that have been done to uh, Indigenous people in Canada with respect to healthcare and admitting that they've got to do better. You know, one of the headlines that they did say was, this was a headline, and if you get an opportunity to Google it, one of the headlines was, deeply ashamed. Canadian Medical Association apologized for the harms to Indigenous peoples. You know, and this organization represents Canada's doctors, has issued a formal apology for the harms the medical profession has caused Indigenous peoples in Canada. So, and that happened Wednesday on traditional lands in Victoria. Their president, talked about their deep shame, the deplorable racism and discrimination and physical, psychological harms that were done to Indigenous people as a result of the actions and inactions of physicians, both historically and today. Yeah. So it was quite powerful. Like, to Indigenous peoples living in Canada, we apologize to you. We are sorry. We are sorry. We have lost your trust and the harms that you, your ancestors, your families, and your communities have experienced. So there's a lot of these quotes, that they talk about. But one of the things that really shook me to my core, made me very emotional, during the apology, they interviewed an elder who has since passed away, but he wanted his story recorded. So this gentleman, our ancestor, was in the residential school. And one day in class, he started spitting up blood. So they took him, the nuns took him, and he was flown to Edmonton. And I think he was like 5 years old. Don't quote me on that, but I think he was 5. He was very young. Um, and he was flown to Edmonton, and then from there he was taken on a train to one of the Indian hospitals that they put people with. They placed First Nations people with tuberculosis in. They were called Indian hospitals, and they used them for TB hospitals, where experiments were conducted and various things. But this one young little boy who was there, um, he was getting treated and getting um, medications, and he had surgery and had part of his lung removed. But he was one of these. You know how naturally it is for children to be able to be curious, and want, like, they had him in this room, and he just wanted to walk around visiting people, and they wouldn't allow him in the hospital. They were very mean and strict. So to discourage him from walking around visiting people, they took his pants off, and he was bare bum. But you know what? That didn't stop him. He said, bare bum or not, I wanted to see people and I wanted to talk to them. I was lonesome for my family. He was away from his parents. You know, he didn't have anybody in there. It was like a cold jail cell. That's what it looked like to me. So, anyways, that didn't stop him. So the next measure of, that the nuns and the people in the hospital did is they put 2 casts on his shins, and in between those 2 casts, they connected him together so that he couldn't walk. He had to hop to go anywhere. So they were really trying to keep him in his room. It was so sad. So he'd have to hop to go to the bathroom, and he couldn't hop around in the hallways. It was just too much for him to try to still go around visiting. But one of the things that really broke my heart was he went to one of the, I don't know what they called them, but one of the helpers there at the hospital. He went to the washroom, and one of those people helped him to the bathroom, and they sodomized him.
Mm-mm.
Oh my God. I don't know how I felt. That was the start of this little boy's abuse. And he stayed in that hospital for 2 years. 2 years he stayed there and endured this pain and suffering. But these hospitals were prevalent back in those days. They called them the Indian hospitals, and they put TB patients in there. A lot of them didn't come out alive. They never made it home, and the families were never told what happened to them. And that's where you look at all these burial sites, right? If you recall that, there was a lot of uncovering of children that never made it home from residential schools that were buried in unmarked graves throughout the country. So a lot of these people in those Indian hospitals never made it home as well. But there was a lot of involuntary testing happening. Testing for TB medications, for example. Like, they were using First Nations people as guinea pigs, which is against the law. You can't do that, right? But we had no rights. We had no rights as people. We weren't considered people. So when he told the story, he wanted it to be documented and told. He said this history is very important for our people to understand the pain that we've endured and why there's so many addictions in our communities. Why there's lack of resources. Like, we don't see opportunities to go and get treated for wellness or trauma-informed care. If you want to go to a good trauma-informed facility, they cost 30 to 50. They're only accessible to the rich in this country. First Nations people, the level of funding or support that we get is to the treatment centers that don't get to the root cause of the problem of the addictions. And there's a world crisis going on right now. There's a war against addictions in our First Nations communities. It's a crisis. I talk about it all the time, and I'll continue to do it because it needs to be addressed. We're burying a generation of young people. Every day, young people are dying, and it breaks my heart that they're so lost. They don't feel love. They don't understand. They're not connected to who they are. There's shame with being First Nation. There's self-awareness and self-empowerment that needs to happen, right? They need to be happy with in their own skin, and they need to be proud of who they are. And a lot of our young people are not there yet. But we need to help them. We need to help them get there. And the programs and services that are offered to them are not working. And I always say this: we know the answers. We have the answers as First Nations people. I know how we can move forward and get better outcomes. But are we allowed to? No, we're not allowed to. We don't. The resources that are dictated and sent to us are for, you know, treatment centers where you go for 30 days and, you come out, and what if you're back to relapsing and you're back to your same environment, you're back to the same addictions. So you're wasting our money on the same outcomes all the time. That's very fiscally irresponsible. I say, and I call that's not responsible spending of our First Nations money. And I say First Nations money because First Nations people, our money for funding and programs and services does not come from taxpayers' dollars.
No.
We have an Indian trust that's set up and that's got trillions of dollars in it, probably. That we look at we're the poorest people in our country, practically. Most of the people on the streets are First Nations people. Most of the people that are dying are of overdose and addictions are First Nations people, yet we're a small minority in this country. Like our population base is very small. So our office, getting back to here, those are the type of patients that we deal with. We deal with people that their voices have been suppressed. They feel very comfortable coming to talk to us, you know. And it's how we do that. I can have somebody come in my office, which I do, periodically. I'll invite them in, I'm sitting in my office, and I had a family come in here like a couple of weeks ago, the mother and the son, and we had a conversation, and I was really trying to empower him, you know. He come in here kind of slouched with his head down, just feeling so defeated, right? When he left here, his head was up and he was smiling because I told him, you're worth it. Your health is worth it. You have hope. You're not going to die. There's treatments for what you're talking to me about, right? And this is what you need to do. So I told him, this is what you do. This is who you see. This is the questions you got to ask your doctor. This is where you need the ability to try and move beyond dialysis. How come they didn't put you on a transplant list for kidney dialysis? What's the long-term plan for you? Have they set with you? Well, no. Well, why haven't they? I'll say, so I'll assign you to one of my investigative analyst support employees that'll work with you, that'll support you, and that can go with you to your appointments and talk to you. So we need to get you on a better road. Smiled at me because I care about people. That's why I'm right? And I talk to them and I speak to them. We investigate a lot of issues that go on. Systemic racism goes on still. People are stereotyped and as being drunks, as being, we're the ones that make our health the way it is. It's your fault. You're this way and this way. I'm like, you know what? The healthcare system, the Health Act, everything says that everybody deserves healthcare in this country, and respectfully. And a lot of the people, actually not there's a lot of good people in the healthcare system. There's a lot that really care, they truly care. But there's those few, that don't belong in those professions.
Mhm.
They're there for a paycheck, and it happens everywhere.
Right.
And those are the ones, right, that are being hurtful.
Well, let's take a little break and give you a chance to have some water or whatever. And
Okay.
we'll just take a little 30-second break. And then when we come back, I'm sure Ramin has some questions and I have some
Mhm.
questions. And thank you for that overview. I picked up on some things that I didn't know. So, sometimes you think you know everything, but you know what? You don't.
Right.
And I'm no exception, right, Ramin? Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dr. Laurie Davis, and we're hosting our VIP show today, Voices of and for Indigenous People. And our special guest, Dr. Dianne Lafond, the Health Ombudsperson, the only one in Canada right now, who's just a wealth of information and knows so much about what's going on inside, outside, and all around. So let's go to you, Ramin. Out of everything that Dianne shared, is there something you'd like to comment on or ask about?
Oh, yes. It's so wonderful to have you, Dr. Lafond. It was education for me, and I really picked up, of course, there were some heartfelt stories, but also the positives that you shared. And that is so important. You mentioned about education, the younger generation having that, again, that honor of knowing their heritage. And that's such a big key because with technology, which is helping everyone, I think, and also having that heritage and understanding the culture. It's such a wonderful time right now for our younger generation.
Mhm.
So I really appreciated that. One thing I'd like to ask you is you obviously one of the role models, and that's a huge key. I work with a lot of athletes and a lot of younger people. They look for their ideal. They like to follow someone that can follow their footsteps. Again, you being a wonderful role model, and the younger generation can see that. They can see the success, the changes that you're making. Do we have lack of that in the community? Do you think we have to really promote that? See that there is a hope. There is, despite all the challenges, we can do this. And you mentioned about a community coming together.
Right. That's a very good point. And as you're talking about that, I was, thinking about that. And quite honestly, it's still we still have a lot of healing to do because there's still in communities. For example, I live in the urban center. For me to go back to my community, there's a lot of unhealthy thinking and behaviors to think, oh, Diane's coming back here and she thinks she's better than us because she's got this big fancy job, and you
Mhm.
know and sadly, that's some of the way that people think still because of the traumas inside. They don't love themselves. There's a lot of jealousy and envy, um, and there's still a big part of that that's going on. Even though I was born and raised in Muskeg to a family of 11 and grew up very poor, but had great teachings from some very wonderful parents that I have values, right? Unfortunately, because that happens a lot to my family, and I don't know why. You know, um, I kind of know why. I think we're really good people. We're taught really well. We work hard. We value our parents. Like I look after. Well, I have a roommate that's 87 years old. That's my mother. You know, and I call her my roommate, but those are part of our values, and a lot of times people get jealous. We need to get beyond that within our own First Nations people. There's a, and even with my honorary doctorate, and it's like a lot of people. Quite a few that are happy for me, but you still see that, you know, which is really, really disheartening. It really hurts that. But I know that we have a lot of work to do in that area. As for a role model for people, um, I'm a role model for my children. You know, my children are uh, just striving for to be better and to say, "Mom, I'm so proud of you, Mom." You know, my mom's a doctor. Like they're telling their friends, and so the important people in my life that respect me and acknowledge me, and I'm quite a humble person. So as for being a role model, I have never really thought of myself that way. So
Huh, good question.
Yeah, but we do think
Mhm.
of you that way.
mhm.
So why don't we talk about Diane? Would you like to reshare the story of our elder? Because we've already made it public and we've already done a show about it. But some of our viewers today may not know. We've got people watching this live right now. So
Mhm.
some people may not be aware of that situation. Is that something we can talk about? What happened to that elder?
Right.
And this would be an example of the work that you do when you get a complaint or you get a phone call or
Mhm.
whatever. So
Yeah.
would you like to share that?
Yes, Dr. Laurie, I can share that. Uh, so a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, geez, I was in Edmonton working with a family from there. And generally, we have to have permission to share stories. However, the story was shared publicly with Dr. Davis, Dr. Laurie Davies, and myself, and has already been made public, via the show. So after, we shared a story about an elder who was in the hospital in Alberta, in Edmonton, um, who was, I believe he was 83 years old. But I've met him on a couple of occasions. His name was Dexter Adams. And we went and talked to him. And um, when he was young, of course, his First Nations children. And, you know, we were not allowed, or our ancestors were not allowed to have long hair. They were shaved in the schools. And braids to us and our hair is very sacred, right? It's a part of who we are, it's part of our being. Anyways, Dexter was in the hospital there and he was waiting for a bed for long term care. He wasn't treated very well in that hospital. One of the things Dexter had took him a long time to grow his braids. He had two braids about down to here. And one of the family friends had went to the hospital and braided his hair for him and did kind of French braids. And, and he was so happy giving the thumbs up. And you could just see the big smile on his face, right? Um, he had really no uh, medical conditions that would have been a threat to his life or anything. He was waiting for long-term care, like a bed in a long-term care home, due to the fact that he had kind of a little bit of issues with his mobility, and his wife was going through cancer and couldn't really care for him at home anymore. So this was kind of the way that the things were going. And one morning, his wife, she went to visit her husband every day, and Eve went there, and she thought she seen Dexter sitting in his wheelchair by the front desk, and she had to do a double take because his hair was short. So she went up to him and said, "What happened to your hair?" And apparently, that morning, one of the nurses took it upon herself to cut his braids off, his hair off. Like his hair was like, just very short, like a buzz cut. And his wife was just upset and shocked. And she wheeled him back to the bedroom and noticed in the garbage can, there would lie Dexter's hair on top of soiled diapers. She was furious, hurt, very hurt. She made the nurse come in and pick up his hair out of the garbage and she put it in a bag. Um, and no permissions were given. Like there was no reason why you would cut someone's hair. It was just appalling, like to think a nurse would do that. So, anyways, this happened, and um, the family contacted our office. So we were completing an investigation, and we had pictures of Dexter before and after. Before his haircut, after his haircut. He died. You could see in the picture after his haircut, after they cut his braids off, his spirit just gone. He was just like so sad. He ended up passing away, and it's just like so upsetting. Like, how do you do that? Do you know what you did to him? And that's the thing. It's lack of education, ignorance as to what you should have never touched his hair for, let alone the sacredness of First Nations people's hair. You know, that's our wisdom, that's our strength. Like, you don't touch it. The only time a person generally sometimes cuts their braids off is when they're in mourning, and they'll cut it off and put it in the casket with the deceased person to take with them, their hair, for strength and guidance. And uh, but anyways, that's what happened to him. And I was reading just recently, it was in the news that the Sikh religion, the Sikh religion, one of the older gentlemen, he was in the hospital, and they shaved off his beard.
Uh-huh.
And it was in the news immediately.
Yes.
Sikh organization were so upset because you do not shave off the beard. They put that in the news right away, that what happened. And so you compare it, like, what's the difference with, it's the same thing that happened to our First Nations elder, you know. So these are the reasons why our office exists, and what we do to support families, to support individuals. And that story, look, Dr. Laurie interviewed the wife, Eve, and the niece, Kathleen. So they've already told the story live, and there's still ongoing work with that. But, there needs to be understanding of this. The people that come into this country need to be educated as well. There's some, that come to Canada and have no clue about Indigenous people and how they treat them, right? But it's, if you see other people treating First Nations people in a derogatory manner, it's learned behavior. You do that too. Like, you look, for example, murdered and missing Indigenous women. Why are First Nations Indigenous women preyed on more than the average? That's because they think Canada doesn't care about them, right?
Yeah.
Look at the ones that they're still looking at in the landfill in Manitoba. Nobody wanted to do it, but yet, can you imagine the parents and the family, how they feel about knowing that the murderer who was murdering First Nations women, he admitted it in court, that he just wanted to get rid of them because they're whatever, for whatever reason,
Yeah.
and they're laying in the landfill, and they still haven't even gotten them out yet, so that families can put it to rest and bury them properly. So this is what I'm saying. There's a lot of systemic stuff that needs to change in this country, and we're doing the work on a small part of it, like to hold people accountable. And I believe we've made a lot of inroads and helped a lot of people. We have over 250 files and people that we've touched so far, and that's in our first year of operations. So I'm quite happy about that, because We've got to build that trust with our people. And I think it's coming, and we've shown that they want to come here to file their grievances. They're not going to these external organizations, and I wonder why.
We have a question. Jill was watching the show, Jill Younghusband. Was the mainstream media approached to report Dexter's story? And thank you for sharing it. May he rest in peace. Jill is our veteran who hosts with me on Thursdays. We do a show for veterans and what has gone on for them. And you cannot believe it, Dr. Dianne, how closely connected the abuse is of our veterans and our Indigenous people. There's lots of similarities. Yesterday, we interviewed Dave Bona, who has been medically injured, and thousands of soldiers were injured with the administration of a drug that had never even been tested for malaria. So there's lots of bad stuff going on. But to answer Jill's question, over to you. I wonder if the mainstream media was approached, and maybe, you know how fast that Chic story got to the news. So how come this maybe didn't get there? You want to comment on that?
Yes, for sure. That's a very good question. Thank you for that. One of the reasons being is because our organization is very new, and unfortunately, what happens a lot with media and First Nations people is there's a lack of trust, because they always want to report on the negatives, right, of First Nations. Like, it's, I don't know why, but it's just always negative spins on things. So when we did that, there was kind of a concern because they're in Alberta. We have Saskatchewan jurisdiction here, and the hospital happened in Alberta. So it wasn't clear, concise, and it wasn't our territory to lead a press release.
Yeah.
It was up to the Alberta to do that, we respect their treaty territory and their First Nations governance systems there, and we have ours here. So it didn't happen in Saskatchewan, and that's the reason why.
But we did it in another more beautiful way by talking to the family, and I know that was very healing for them just to be able to share the story. So I felt that was a terrific idea that you had for us to do it that way, and now it's out there.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right, we have about 5 minutes. Ramin, anything else you want to ask Dianne, or anything else, Dianne, you want to share? And thank you so much. I'll thank you at the end as well, but this has been most informative. And I'd love for us to get the word out that we have the platform. We've created the platform, and we're here every Friday at 11 o'clock consistently, unless there's an extenuating circumstances. But every Friday at 11 o'clock, and we just ask our viewers, this is streaming live right now on Facebook and on our YouTube channel, and just go in and share it, make a comment, get in touch with us. If there's someone out there that right now I'm looking for guests for next week who know a lot about Orange Shirt Day and Every Child Matters Day. So if there are some folks out there who would like to come and have a voice next week on our show, next Friday, we would encourage that. Right, Ramin? We're the hosts, but we love the guests. It's not about us. It's about being here to support the information. So anything else from you, Ramin? And then we'll have Dianne have the last say here of the day.
Oh, absolutely. This story that you shared, that I think is one of the purposes of this program. It's about the awareness. So although we like to work with the communities, but it's the outside that they have no education, no awareness, and hopefully sharing the stories like that, which might seem very minimal from an outside person thinking, but not understanding the value and, again, the history behind it. So I'm hoping using this platform with wonderful guests like Dr. Lafond, if we can share that, so the people from, again, globally, to understand actual culture, understand the values, and also the challenges. Those are big things. So, and I really appreciate you sharing those. So what I took is like the good news and the bad news and the positives and challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
We've got a long road ahead, but it's all light, like you said, light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
That's exactly right. And focusing on the positive way forward, I'm always like, okay, so how are we going to correct this? How can we move forward? And how do we prevent this from happening again?
Mhm.
So, some of the challenges I have is the history that's shared needs to be real history, needs to be real teachings, right?
Right.
Um, and those are like the video that was done with the family. How powerful was that for the people to watch that in hospitals? Just the teaching on our hair, you know,
Mhm.
on
Mhm.
how you do not, cut people's hair. Like, and realistically, that's a human right to everyone. I
Absolutely.
wouldn't expect you to be in a hospital, Dr. Laurie or Dr. Ramin, and have somebody go up to you and, oh, your hair is annoying, so I'm going to shave it off and cut it off. Like, there's boundaries and there's spaces that you don't cross.
That's right.
And that's for all human beings. That is not, just for Indigenous First Nations people, but it's for somebody to go within that private space and do something so intimate like that is quite uh,
Yeah.
disturbing, right?
Right.
Very
Mhm.
disturbing.
Mhm.
But you're right. Teachings need to happen. Education needs to happen. But people need to be open for those discussions. You need to admit, like what the Canadian Medical Health Association have acknowledged that the healthcare system is not it's not doing justice for First Nations people, Indigenous people in Canada. So when you start acknowledging and recognizing, then there's actually a way forward for reconciliation. And what
That's
does
right.
that look like? How will that look like? And how do we engage the Indigenous people to help us lead that?
Mhm.
Because we need to be a part of those discussion tables on how, you know, how we transform or how we implement parts of our traditional teachings and medicines in our own healthcare system that we had prior to contact, right?
Mhm.
So, if I take an Indigenous medicine into the hospital, for example, to my son, when it's sent to the pharmacy to see what kind of ingredients are in there, that is disrespect. You don't do that.
Mhm.
But they look at it in the Western way, thinking they're trying to be safe for him so that he's not taking anything that'll interact with his medications. But quite honestly, they don't know what traditional medicines are, right?
No.
And how they're prepared and, different, how it goes right from the day of picking your medicines in the bush or in the mountains, wherever, and the prayers and the tobacco offerings that are done before you even take the medicine from Mother Earth. There's protocols.
Right.
Then there's prayers that you need to do when you take the medicine, right? And because if you don't and there's no belief, the medicine won't work. But in my experience, I've experienced so much with traditional medicines that have, you know, healed
Mhm.
cancers, all kinds of things. Like we've had those in place since before contact, as I said.
Mhm.
We never had diabetes like what happens now, you know,
No.
food,
Well, I think that's another whole show.
yeah,
We need to find somebody who can come on and teach us about the medicines and how to use them. And so I'm sure you know somebody
yeah.
that,
There'll
we need like, and
be
that's another
protocols,
purpose of
Dr.
the show.
Laurie, that I'll tell you about that you'll need to do prior to bringing someone like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. See, we need to be
Okay.
educated. We do. And, the lack of education wasn't our fault either because, in the white world, a lot of things were hidden from us. We had no idea what was going on
Mhm.
at all. Right. And I mentioned this the other day. 10 minutes down the road from where my dad was brought up was a big residential school in Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia, which burned to the ground, thank God, but closed down in 1962. And we would drive by that. Even my dad didn't know what that was. We thought it was a hospital. Like, really? It was just a sham. A whole big sham, right? Dianne, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show, being our mentor, being my friend, being Ramin's friend. And actually, we could announce, Dianne, that both Dianne and I have the same birthday, July
Yes.
7th. Yes. So when we met, it was instant
Mhm.
love at first sight, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And I've watched you as you've grown and moved into that role. And it's just wonderful, terrific work that you do every day, every day, every day. And I just have so much respect for you.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I had the pleasure of working with her staff last year, and they are amazing also. Good
Mhm.
job.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we better say goodbye. And it's the fastest hour of my week when we do a show. It's just amazing what gets shared.
Mhm.
And Dianne, I'll make sure that you get your own private MP4 of the show. I have to convert it, but we can do that. So you have that for your office and for your resources as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Shall we say goodbye? Do we have to say
Never,
goodbye?
never say goodbye.
What do we
You
say?
know, in a First Nations culture, we don't ever say
There's no, I
goodbye.
know. There's no, what do we say?
We
Give us
say
the word.
goodbye when you're burying someone. We say, see
Ah,
you later, we'll talk to you again, you know,
okay.
and yeah, there's no goodbye
Can't wait to talk
until
to you
it's really goodbye. Okay.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Well, have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thank you
Yeah,
for
Thank
having
you.
me today, Dr. Laurie, and
you
my
bet.
friend, Dr. Ramin, both of you.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
appreciate you. I respect you, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank
Appreciate it.
you.